I've been having snacks through the day. I think I had a bagel, a slice of pizza, some carrots, but I've been getting a feast from the classes. So prayerfully, you have too. One of the things that I think, and hopefully you're getting away from this too, is that what's been shared, these are not complex or complicated things, even from what Ingrid just shared, she mentioned things like Sunday suppers. Okay, that's not complicated. Blood drives, hygiene and cold weather kits, gift cards and gift cards from grocery stores and so forth. These things are not complicated if we have the heart to really live them out. The whole goal again is to give people a taste of God's kingdom, and we continue that with our next session here with Dontaye Carter. So his lesson is going to be "Let Your Light Shine." A little bit of information about Dontaye. He joins us from Georgia. He was raised by a single mother who taught him the value of hard work, perseverance, and sacrifice. As Dontaye has witnessed more of the ravages of society, he has dedicated his life to highlighting injustice in a way that drives change. 1 year after working in Fulton County's district attorney's office, Dontaye's concern for 4 teens falsely accused of murder led him to open his own public relations firm to assist attorneys in tackling injustice. Dontaye's firm amplified many voices in Georgia and across the country, shining a light on some of the nation's most prominent legal matters, including the cases of Ahmaud Arbery, Maggie Thompson, Jimmy Atkinson, and survivors of R. Kelly, and many, many more. He has also worked on campaigns that brought attention to SB 202 and voter suppression. During this session, we will learn how we can let our light shine in our neighborhoods, kind of continuing the theme that we have for the afternoon sessions here. This, of course, requires that we depend and get our strength from God. But if we know the story of the 4 soils in Luke 8, it also requires our perseverance. Dontaye exemplifies the perseverance he learned from his mom and from his God. Let's strive to live lives of perseverance. Let's never give up letting our light shine. Right now, we're going to go ahead and have a video. That's a 2 to 3 minute video that Dontaye has asked to be played prior to his session. After that, he's going to go ahead and start. However, before the video plays, I do want to just remind us that after Dontaye's session, we do have a panel discussion. So please get a chance to think about the questions you'd like to ask some of our speakers. And then we're going to go ahead and close out our conference after the panel discussion. So let's go ahead and play the video.
Georgia State Representative Park Cannon was literally locked out while the bill that is designed to restrict ballot access to people of color was signed into law. She joins me now for her first interview since that dramatic arrest, and her attorney, Gerald Griggs, is here as well. Thank you both for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for getting the information out to all of America about what's happening in Georgia. I was afraid, just like many Americans are when they come into contact with law enforcement, that there would be a need for me to protect myself.
And we walked down this road, we walked down that road, and we stopped right here. We knew something was wrong.
Because all of this stuff is heavy. There's nothing light or easy about any case that I had, since my company's doors have opened. It's all been heavy stuff. But then again, if I don't step into the space, who does?
Right.
Because what a lot of people don't realize is Black people in PR, what is it? It was the result of advocacy. It was the result of getting the word out about what was going on. Jim Crow, all the things that happened during segregation, the lynching, the killings. Like, that's where Black PR came from. And so when you understand where Black PR came from, you'll understand what you need to continue to do in order to be successful in this space.
I just want to just really take some time to just shout out Dontaye. First of all, many people probably don't know how tirelessly he works, A, for his community, B, for his craft, and C, for his family. He's a man of faith, a man of great integrity.
You know, a lot of people ask me why I'm in this space. It wasn't just I started my business and jumped into this space, but I jumped into the space because I saw that there was a need for me to be here.
For you to step up and put yourself in that situation, I definitely applaud you.
On the front lines and also fight for justice. This little baby right here. Dontaye Carter is the recipient of this year's Public Relations Pioneer Award. Y'all give it up for Mr. Carter right now. Thank you all so very much.
Wow, thank y'all so much. Atoma, thank you. Thank you for the work that you all continue to do here. It's just so important. These conferences, taking the time to allow us as disciples and Christians to understand how we can put our faith into action. And it's I'm here today on my spiritual birthday, January 11th. Super encouraged to be here. Again, I just want to thank Atoma and everybody that put this together and inviting me to be here. What I'm going to talk about is how to let your light shine. As you heard Atoma say, excuse me, I'm getting over a little cold, so I may do that a few times, so I apologize. But as you heard Atoma say, it was what happened when I was in the Fulton County DA's office. I was the youngest director of public relations to take over, lead up that communications office. That started after I had been in the news industry for over 10 years, worked as a video editor, producer, executive producer, anchor reporter, traveled across the US. And I settled down here in Atlanta once I decided to get married. And this journey has been amazing. But it was when I decided to leave the news industry and I went into the Fulton County DA's office and I saw how laws are applied. Very few times, unless you're involved in the criminal justice system or unless your property taxes skyrocket through the roof or unless there's something that is so grievous that happens that impacts you, right? That you come face to face with the decisions that are made in city halls and the legislatures across America. You actually see the impact of those things. And the first time I saw the impact of decisions was when I was in the Fulton County DA's office. And it was those 4 young boys between the ages of 14 and 16. They were accused of murder. And being there, getting calls from media outlets across the world asking about what happened in this particular case. That was the first time where I had seen the impact and I had been a part of it in the sense of I was the one behind scenes working on statements to ensure that we save face within the DA's office. And it was difficult. It was difficult being in that meeting and hearing the DA ask the prosecutor what happened. To hear him ask her, did you do your own follow-up investigation to what police gave you? And hear her say, no, I didn't. And to hear him follow up and ask, did you even check he was like, all these boys had cell phones, right? Did you check their cell phone records? And she said, no. And he said, that should have been the first thing that you did. And I just remember sitting in that office and feeling my heart just sinking because these were 4 boys that looked just like me. And I knew I was going to have to be the one that when it came to public facing media, spin this narrative. And it was difficult for me. And it caused me great anguish. And I remember just sitting home talking to my wife about it and letting her know that, there's just a lot that I've been seeing and I just want to do more. And I think that's where God really started working on my heart and softening my heart to the injustice around. I think for so long, I saw everything that I experienced in life and I just kind of let it fall by the wayside, not realizing that these experiences growing up in a single parent working household, these experiences being poor, these experiences being Black were something that God could use. And so, Tyler, if you can pull up the PowerPoint. Oh, you are a rock star. Y'all see that, man? That was fast. But again, excuse me. The title of our lesson today is going to be "Let Your Light Shine," and we can, let me see, make sure. There we go. I apologize. But yeah, I just wanted to do a quick introduction or reintroduce myself, as Jay-Z says. But this is me, my beautiful wife, Karen, my daughter, Kylie. This is the book that Kylie and I wrote. It's called My Daddy and Me. These are pictures from us visiting Portugal. But this is my beautiful family that have been really, outside of God, the source and inspiration behind what I do. And what I do is here. I hold quite a few titles. I serve as the first vice president of the Atlanta NAACP, one of the landmark historic organizations here in Atlanta that Dr. King, his father, once led as well during the civil rights movement, carrying on that legacy. Also serve as the North Fulton Dems chair, which covers the north part of Fulton County. Fulton County is the largest county in the state of Georgia. Now, I know a lot of folks get into this whole partisan, bipartisan. Listen, Democratic Party was where I felt like I could do the most work and where God was leading me. And so that's why I stepped in to do that work. The work with really helping the families of Ahmaud Arbery, being one of the primary communication strategists of really getting the word out of what happened. The picture in the top corner is me with many of the lawmakers and educators as we're speaking in defense of Black history in public schools across Georgia. Right below that is me and President of the NAACP, Gerald Griggs, meeting Wes Moore at the NAACP conference. Right below that is the North Fulton Dems, me helping to really lead us out for the Independence Day parade. But I just wanted to screenshot and highlight just the involvement and the work here. On the right-hand side, you'll see where Biden signs Ossoff's bill on prison, huge prison reform bill that, I was really honored to be a part of, where for the first time in American history, federal prisons were reformed. They had to change the way they worked with female prisoners, pregnant prisoners. It was a whole landscape change there. And it was something that we were able to do with bringing on the entire union of correction officers. And so just really organizing from the ground up and seeing that we can make change and make powerful change. And that was something that really inspired me. But it started for me back in 2016. And that's what I wanted to talk about, was this journey. My wife and I going to Rome and walking through the Vatican, learning about the history of the Catholic Church. It was, we get church here in America from such a Western viewpoint that it's often so often void of a global perspective. And as I started this journey and I started to see myself in God's plan, in the way that God created me, this was something that was extremely impactful. And I wanted to show these because if you look here in the bottom left picture, you'll see a pew and you'll see writings on there. My wife and I, and right next to that is my little girl, and my wife, she was taking pictures as well. We went to the first African Baptist church in Savannah, Georgia. It was the first church, first African American Black church built here in North America, oldest, built in 1773. And it was built by the hands of enslaved Americans. And it really touched me, but also tied me into the history and helped me to see the bigger picture of who we are with this. So the writings on that pew are in ancient Hebrew, Amharic. And it touched me because this whole time, I had been fed that the slaves were ignorant, they couldn't read, they couldn't write. And here I am seeing that they were literally writing and speaking in a language that Jesus did when he walked this earth. And it was extremely powerful. And from here, this led me to sitting down with theologians. And so before I jump to the next slide, let me just explain these next few pictures. But these ones up top, they're from our trip to Portugal. So I did the AfricanAncestry.com. My DNA traced back on my father's side to Portugal prior to the transatlantic slave trade. And what was so unique about that for me is that I didn't know that 60% of the enslaved came from Portugal. I thought everybody came from Africa in terms of the history and what we're taught. And so I get there, and my wife and I were seeing the markers of Rua de Pocos de Negros, the Black Street, and Travessa de Judeo, where it crosses with the Jewish path, and seeing the intersections of all that history. And it made such a huge connection for me because, again, going back and visiting the First African Baptist Church, knowing that my family had come in on my father's side through Savannah, and on my mother's side, they came in through Virginia, just being able to see this interconnectedness. And Ingrid did such an amazing job of talking about our shared humanity. But it's like when you actually see things unfold like this to me was that most inspiring part. And so this next slide is about that vision of a shared humanity. And I want to start here with one of the Jewish historians, Flavius Josephus, who wrote a series of historical books called The Antiquity of the Jews. One of the theologians that I've grown very fond of has really encouraged me to really look at some of these biblical reference books that help to connect these things, because and connect in a way where you're getting context, right? And one of the things that as I was reading was what they were saying about Joseph. After everything that he had gone through, being sold into slavery by his brothers, being accused of rape, being thrown in prison, what it said was, after he became the second in command over Egypt, it said, and this is during the time of that great famine, he says, nor did he open his market of corn for the people of the country, Egypt only, but strangers had liberty to buy also. Joseph, being that all men who are naturally akin to one another should have assistance from those that lived in happiness. The part that really struck out to me there was him acknowledging that we are naturally akin to one another, naturally akin. When he understood in that dream that there was a great famine coming, he understood that not only am I going to have to take care of Egypt, but I'm going to have to take care of the rest of the known world, because that's what was coming. What was coming to him were people from the rest of the known world, because they also needed to survive. And he also knew that they were kin to him, because there was that firm understanding of we all descended from Adam and Eve. And so as I'm learning and I'm going on this journey and this voyage, for me, this is what builds on that letting my light shine, because I'm not looking at this as white or black or Democrat or Republican. I'm looking at this as right versus wrong. And at the end of the day, whether you look white, black, Asian, Hispanic, you are still my brother, you are still my sister, because we all descended from two common ancestors. And so I want to go in here. Our image is his image. And I said it like that because our image should be pointing back to the Most High. It should be pointing back to God, that universal truth that we all descend from two ancestors. And I love just kind of going back to Genesis 1:26, when it says, then God said, let us make humans in our image according to our likeness. He made them in the divine likeness. You, me, Ingrid, Dr. Jacoby, we are all in that divine image. What should we do? What should we be doing, knowing that everything that he is, he put in us? Those lights, that light, when we talk about letting his light shine, and I'm going to keep asking these questions because I want you all to think about it. What does it mean for your light to shine? What does that mean? And so what I learned from Joseph and his example, and we're going to look at Joseph and we're going to look at Esther, because these are folks that for me were so powerful, because they didn't just do this with nonprofits, and they didn't just do this in neighborhoods. They did this for countries. They did this in nations. They did it as a means of protecting all people. And that, to me, is what was so inspiring and encouraging, because they could have said, no, I'm just going to do it in this little space. But they fought to ensure that what was written on paper reflected humanity from a legislative standpoint. And that's so important. And so we look at Joseph's example. His faith drove him to care for all, showing not only compassion, but unity. And so we look at when he came back to his brothers, right? When his brothers came back to Egypt, excuse me. And I know many of you all know these stories. But for me, these things become real when I'm able to tie them into my own life. It said, then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brothers, and he sought a place to weep, right? He was overwhelmed when he saw his brothers, knowing that they had sold him into slavery. But I love when I fast forward, right? And I go back and we're looking at his story. It says, do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. Now, therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. This spoke to me in a way because, in 2018, when I had the attorney, Gerald Griggs, first reach out to me about the survivors of the women in the R. Kelly case. And he said, man, I need your help. He hasn't been charged. And I remember, and I share this story a lot, but I remember kind of going through the evidence that he sent me and just talking out loud in the presence of my wife, and just talking about, man, I don't know what to charge on this case. He hasn't been charged. And just thinking, my head on being in the DA's office, knowing what prosecutors are going to be looking at. And I remember my wife saying, at some point, we need our husbands, our brothers, our fathers, we need the men in our lives to act as though they know there's a problem, and there's a problem. And the fact that you're helping me to raise a Black woman, and this is your response, is problematic. And it really forced me to take a harder look at my role in misogyny and all these things that take, I'm not saying that I'm a person in power, but it forced me to do a lot of self-reflecting. It helped me to understand that I still have a role. It doesn't matter what my upbringing is, right? That stuff doesn't determine my actions. I still have control over how I respond. And what I started to see through these things is that everything that I had gone through in my life, whether it had been going through homelessness, poverty, all these things that got me to these moments, it gave me context. My wife was giving me context about the struggle that everyday women in this country face. And at this point, I had an obligation to do something. And when I sat back and I looked at Joseph, and I think back to when he said that God allowed these things to happen for the saving of lives, the context that I had been given was also giving me an opportunity to make a difference. And God he had allowed that pain to become a purpose. And so I know I'm in here doing a whole lot of talking. My apologies. But Joseph and Esther were one of those folks that allowed me to see that I can work within these halls of power, the city halls, the legislatures. I can do those things and make an impact. And what I started to see as I got involved, honestly, is that there are people who have evil intentions, who are selfish, who are greedy, who have the ears of the people that should be ensuring that there's equity in these places. But if we're not there as disciples and Christians, if we're not at the legislatures and the city hall, see, Joseph was an advocate for Christ in that political space, as was Esther. They were advocates. And that's what inspired me to get more involved. And so when we sit back and we look at, and this is that second slide, but God's plan often goes beyond individuals to nations united under him. And I love that point because, when we sit back and we talk about what Joseph said, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. I would not have thought about how me being homeless as a 9-year-old, how that would have impacted me now. But in that moment, as a 9-year-old, that there was so much uncertainty in my future, I made a promise to God. I wasn't a disciple at the time. I wasn't a Christian. All I knew is the folks who cared for me, the folks who loved me, my mom, my grandmother, my stepdad. Like when they came in and they said, you got to pray, you got to love, you got to have this bigger picture. When I leaned on their faith, right, and I prayed that, God, if you could help us to get through this, I'll do my part to make sure it never happens to any other kid again. And that was my promise. And when I'm sitting back and I'm looking at the Surviving R. Kelly case, the Ahmaud Arbery, like when folks ask me why did I go so hard and what inspired those things, it was God reminding me of that promise that, hey man, you went through a lot, but I got you through it, and I need you to go back and hold on to that promise and take care of some other kids. And that's where, now it's not just us mobilizing and organizing on a political level, right? Like, yeah, it's the Norfolk Dams, yeah, it's the Atlanta NAACP, yes, the Georgia State Conference at NAACP, but it's also Super Dads at my daughter's school, where we go up and we mentor many of the kids like myself who they're not bad kids. They just need somebody to believe in them enough to where they can go through those tough times and they can persevere. That's community. That's how Jesus showed up. Folks wanted to know why Jesus wasn't in the synagogues on the Sabbath and why he was out with these people out in the streets, the poor, the blind, the hungry. It's because he understood the power of impact. And that's really what I'm hoping that you all take away from this lesson here is letting your light shine. It's all about the power of impact. And so going into Esther had Mordecai, her cousin, who raised her. But when he became aware of the assassination attempt on the king of Persia, he stepped in, he intervened, right? But also when he learned that there was going to be a mass slaughtering of the Jews, he said, Esther, we got to do something. A lot of folks forget that many people within the palace courts didn't know Esther was Jewish. It was something, she had made her identity known, but she knew her people. And it was for me, so encouraging and so inspiring to hear him say, and that's why I put it up here from Esther 4:12, where he said, Esther, don't think just because you live in the king's palace, you will be the only Jew to escape. If you keep quiet now, help and freedom for the Jews will come from another place, but you and your family will all die. Your father's family will all die. To me, what stood out about this is the Most High God is going to do what he does. He's going to save. He always raised up prophets. Even when you think back to, 1 King 19:18, where Elijah is going back and forth about them trying to kill him. And he said, man, I still have 7,000 other people that haven't bowed their knee to Baal. And he was like, whether you do it now or not, like, salvation is coming. I'm going to raise up somebody. You have a chance to be a part of God's plan or you don't. But God has always given us that opportunity to be a part of his plan. And so, when you look at Esther's story, and that's like, even when you look at some of the reference books around the Bible and them talking the different historical documents, and they talk about Esther, it was very clear that they understood that her being there was bigger than just the king finding her to be super attractive. It was clear that God had a plan for it. And that's what I love about God, right? When he puts his plan in motion, when he gets things rolling, it becomes evident to everybody that something bigger is transpiring here, because that's who God is. He's a big God and he does big miracles, and he's asking us to be a part of that journey. And that's what I think is so inspiring about this. And so thinking about when she went before the king, knowing that if he didn't extend that scepter to her, that she could die, and she fasted to make sure she got her heart in the right place. And she sent a letter back to Mordecai and said, hey, can you have you and all your friends fast too? I'm going to do this, but I'm going to need some strength. To me, those things are powerful because fear is a natural result of you standing up. And when you feel like you're standing up alone. And that's what I love about even the vulnerability here, because you'll see the same things with Joseph. Like, the emotions were there, but I love what they said about Joseph. Excuse me. Even when Flavius Josephus in his historical document says about Joseph and how prison could not change Joseph from being righteous. Like, that's so powerful, because it's regardless of what condition he was in, right, or made to be in, he refused to fall into this position of, well, I'm in prison, I'm just going to be rough, I'm just going to fight, I'm just going to yell, I'm just going to do all these. He said, no, he still made the decision to be righteous. And so when I look at him and what he did when he became the second in command of Egypt, when I look at Esther as queen of one of the greatest empires in world history, these are powerful because it shows God still working. And so that was one of the things that I wanted to highlight. Wherever God places you, it's for his purpose. We just need to step boldly into it. Silence in the face of injustice, it's not an option. Faith is. Faith requires that action. And by letting our light shine, we show our trust in God and our ability to be used for something greater. And so those were some of the things that I really, really focused on. And so finding the light in darkness, trauma as a path to triumph, that was one of the hardest things. I think because of how I came up, because of the things that I endured, I didn't see myself in certain places. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the courage. And it took a lot to move that needle. It took me seeing what happened at the DA's office. It took me seeing the R. Kelly case. It took me seeing Ahmaud. And I mean, these were all instances where God prevailed. R. Kelly went to prison for what he did to these girls. It was a sex trafficking ring. That's what it was. They were sexually exploiting these young girls, and he went to prison for it. The man who shot and killed Ahmaud went to prison for it. In Georgia, when we worked with Fred Gray, the attorney for Dr. King and Rosa Parks, when we worked with him to raise awareness about SB 202, which is where they were intentionally suppressing Black votes based upon tendencies. They had a whole spill on how they were intentionally going to water down the vote. And to see that when we came together, when we worked together, to see God show up the way he did, it inspired me and encourages me. So folks are like, Dontaye, you've done a lot, but it's like, with the little that God gave me and seeing him work there, it's given me that courage to do more. And that's what I'm so inspired by. And so what I wanted to ask is, what are the pains in your life that God may be using to prepare you for a higher purpose? I share with y'all some of my struggles. I share with y'all some of the things that I have gone through with being homeless, being in an abusive relationship. I've shared those things, right? What are some of the things within your own life where you look back and you're like, man, I hated that I went through that. I would not want anybody else to go through that. But you still feel God pulling at you to do more. See, that pain gives us a context that most people will never have. And while we shy away from politics and all these things because we know there's corruption, we know there's deceit, we know there's lying, what it does is it gives the devil a playground. Those places become his playground. And so when they talk about kicking out, when they talk about going through and kicking out immigrants, when they talk about taking out Black history, when they talk about eliminating a woman's right to choose, when all these things are coming up, it's because the light of Christ isn't in those rooms bringing context. We all know the nature, whether we know the Bible as well as we want to or not. We know the nature of God. We know the nature of Christ. We saw that when he brought the Israelites out of Egypt. We saw that when he allowed them to go into Canaan and found Israel. We saw that when Jesus went up on that cross and died. We know what the heart is, and so we know when something happens, when it's right or when it's wrong. But what I do want to encourage y'all is be inspired by knowing who God is, because then you know how to walk, you know how to move. It's how Joseph and Esther, regardless of their fear, regardless of their anger, all these things that they faced from going through what they went through, they knew how to respond because they knew the heart of God. So when Joseph says all this happened for the saving of many lives, he was able to see that big picture. That's what he was able to see. And that's what I really want us to focus on. And so I don't want y'all looking at what Dontaye's done and thinking, wow, he's done a lot. I want you to see how you can be a part of God's plan, because God has different plans for each and every one of us. And so when I look at let me just go back here. When I look at the Christian's role in a divided world, and that's all everybody's talking about within this political space, but what I want to bring forth is a call to action from Joseph's example. Joseph's compassion wasn't limited by his own comfort or his role in Egypt's government. As Christians, our calling is to rise above partisanship and embody God's kingdom values: justice, mercy, love. Share specific challenges you faced. I want y'all to, again, share those stories. Think about what I've been through, how I can help. Sometimes we minimize our own stories. Don't do that. Don't. Everything that you've gone through, whether big or small, God is using for his greater purpose. And we have to be able to accept that. We have to. And, I talked a lot about R. Kelly and Ahmaud, but one of the things that I really wanted to hone in is, what traumas are you carrying that God may be using to prepare you for a greater purpose? That's one question, right? And I'm listing these out because, again, I want y'all to think about them. How can you use your pain to bring light to others? And are you willing to trust God's plan even when the path forward seems unclear? When I called my wife and I talked about starting my own business, I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew where I was at ain't working. That's all I knew. Where I'm at ain't working. But I started walking. And God had to push me a few times, some hard pushes. But I think that when you start walking on faith and you get confident walking on faith, some powerful things happen because God can use that. He's always used it. He's always been able to use it. And so I hope that this is something that you all can be encouraged by. And I know I got the final charge up here, but I feel like I talked through this one already. But I just, one of the things that I had put here is Joseph's story reminds us that our pain is never wasted. God's plan is to use our trauma to produce triumph, not just for you, but for those he's calling you to serve. So let your light shine, even in darkest times, knowing that God's purpose is always greater than the pain. And I have this picture up. This is the last one. And this is one that Senator John Ossoff sent me just what was it, last week? And it was a picture of us right after President Joe Biden had signed that historic prison reform. And it reminded me of what we're able to do when good people come together. I think we look at the civil rights movement, we look at all these things, and we forget that they were people just like us, that they were just like, something's got to change, and they decided to change some things. And in 2020, when it felt like the whole world was on fire, we got a Jewish candidate for senator, in Georgia elected, and the first Jewish candidate and the first Black candidate. And because of that election, now we were able to get nationwide prison reform. And it was just inspiring because it shows that everything seems heavy until you do it. And you can do it. And so your role may be just, you know what, I'm just gonna knock on doors and turn out and tell people about the election, the candidates. It may be saying, hey, I got 4 kids at the school. I want to just mentor the kids there, right? What you do is never small. And I think that's the box that we have to get ourselves out of is, oh, I'm just doing this. No, it's never, I'm just doing this. It's, this is where God has me. And I can't wait to see how he's going to connect it into his bigger plan, because that's what he's going to do. And this is what I get so inspired by. And again, I just wanted to end on this picture because this was something that it took 4 years to get there. It took us electing him. It took us bringing together all these different prison systems, talking about what the issues were, helping them to understand something's got to change, and then having a senator with the boldness to say, okay, let me write this into legislation. Let me pull in all these other senators from across America. Let me get my votes, and let's get this on the president's desk to be signed. And I think that the more and more that good people of good conscience and good faith, disciples, Christians, get into these spaces, I think that we can see more of these things happen. And so I want to go ahead and end there and just thank you all so much for tuning in. And 45 minutes is a lot, or a short time to get everything in. So I hope I didn't go too fast for anyone. But thank y'all so much for this time. Atoma, Tyler, the whole crew. I just really appreciate everything that you all have done. And I'll be back here in a second to join you all for the panel.